Nour stands paralyzed in a vast, endless corridor of books. Suddenly, the solid library shelves begin to dissolve into gray ash. A thick, freezing fog rolls in rapidly from the shadows. It swallows the floor and the warm light completely. Glowing, aggressive question marks swirl around her head. She spins around, looking for an exit. There is no way out visible. The story begins in Nour's absolute favorite place on Earth. She sits tucked away in a cozy, quiet corner of the university library. It is a warm, inviting space filled with towering wooden shelves. Golden sunlight streams through the tall, arched windows, illuminating dancing dust motes. Nour has piles of heavy academic books stacked high around her like a fortress. She is studying philosophy and science with an intense, joyful focus. Her glasses slide down her nose as she reads rapidly. She pushes them up absently, completely absorbed in the world of knowledge. For years, her sharp intellect was her greatest source of strength. She firmly believed that faith and reason walked hand in hand together. She loved discovering the complex signs of a law within the laws of science. The world felt logical, ordered, perfectly designed, and beautiful to her mind. She felt deeply secure in her structured understanding of the universe. Her faith was inherited from her parents, simple and largely untested by pain. The colors in the library are rich, earthy, and comforting. Deep browns of ancient wood and warm golds of sunlight dominate the scene. She feels a profound sense of peace and intellectual purpose here. It is the calm before the impending, devastating spiritual storm arrives. She turns a page, smiling at a complex diagram of a cell. She feels safe here, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of the ages. The scene shifts abruptly to a large, crowded, echoing lecture hall. A charismatic, confident professor stands at the podium, speaking passionately to the students. He is discussing the origins of the universe and the history of morality. He presents a compelling, logical argument that directly challenges traditional religious narratives. Nour listens intently, her pen hovering frozen over her notebook page. The professor pauses for effect, then asks a sharp, probing question. He asks about the existence of suffering in a world created by God. If there is a benevolent God, why is there so much pain? The question hangs in the air, heavy, uncomfortable, and demanding an answer. A sudden, cold chill seems to ripple physically through the warm room. Nour frowns, waiting for the usual counter-argument to arise in her mind. But this time, the answer does not come instantly or easily. A tiny hairline fracture forms quietly in her confident, structured worldview. The warm lighting of the lecture hall seems to dim slightly in her vision. A subtle, desaturated gray filter begins to overlay her view of the professor. She looks around, wondering if anyone else feels the earth shaking beneath them. Everyone else seems to be nodding or taking notes, completely unbothered. The seed of doubt has been planted deep inside her rational mind. It is small, but it feels heavy, cold, and incredibly dense. She writes down the question, her hand trembling slightly for the first time. The ink on the page looks darker and more permanent than usual. It is late at night in Nour's quiet, shadowy bedroom. The room is lit only by the harsh, artificial glow of her laptop screen. She is no longer studying her assigned university coursework for her classes. She is deep in a terrifying, endless internet rabbit hole. Browser tabs are open to dozens of forums, blogs, and debate videos. She reads aggressive, well-structured arguments against the existence of a creator. She watches videos dissecting religious texts with harsh, unforgiving skepticism and logic. The screen casts a cold, pale blue light on her tired face. Her eyes are wide, red-rimmed from lack of sleep, and filled with anxiety. The more she reads, the more confused and lost she becomes. The logical framework she built her life on begins to shake violently. Questions multiply like a virus in her tired, overworked mind. Is it all just a psychological construct for comfort? What if I have been wrong my whole life about everything? The questions buzz loudly, drowning out the peaceful silence of the night. The room feels claustrophobic, the shadows stretching long and thin across the floor. The comforting books on her shelf now look like accusing, silent witnesses. She feels a physical nausea churn in the pit of her stomach. She wants to stop looking, but she cannot look away from the screen. She is searching desperately for certainty, but finding only more chaos and noise. The digital world is feeding her doubts, starving her soul of peace. The next day, Nour stands on her prayer mat in her room. It is time for Dhuhr prayer, a daily habit she never missed. She raises her hands to her ears for the opening takbir. Allahu Akbar, she says, but the words feel hollow and empty today. They hang in the air, lacking their usual weight and spiritual resonance. She folds her hands over her chest and closes her eyes tightly. Usually, this is a time of peace, connection, and grounding for her. Today, it feels like she is talking to a blank, indifferent wall. A terrifying, intrusive thought whispers insidiously in her ear during her recitation. Is anyone actually listening to you right now, or is this just theater? The thought sends a shiver of ice down her spine, freezing her heart. She tries to focus on the surah she is reciting from memory, but the words feel like mere sounds, devoid of meaning or divine power. The gray fog from the hook begins to materialize in the room. It swirls around her ankles, cold, damp, and isolating. The room loses its color, turning a desaturated, lifeless gray. She feels like a hypocrite standing there in the posture of Salah. How can she pray when she isn't sure if he is there? The disconnection between her physical actions and her doubting heart is painful. She rushes through the prayer motions to escape the feeling of fraudulence. She finishes the prayer and sits back on her heels, feeling utterly alone. Days turn into weeks of agonizing, relentless mental turmoil for Nour. She returns daily to the vast university library, but the atmosphere has shifted completely. It no longer feels like a sanctuary of warm, inviting wisdom. The towering wooden shelves seem to stretch upwards endlessly. They disappear into dark, ominous shadows above her head. The books now look like imposing, silent brick walls. They seem to be closing in on her physically. She pulls book after book from the shelves with frantic energy. She reads complex philosophy and evolutionary biology texts. She dives into comparative religion and harsh atheist critiques. She is desperately looking for a silver bullet answer. She wants a single fact to silence her doubts forever. But every answer she finds only spawns 10 new questions. The sheer volume of conflicting information begins to overwhelm her. Her tired mind struggles to process the opposing viewpoints. The visual metaphor of the fog intensifies significantly here.
A thick, swirling, suffocating gray mist creeps between the aisles. It obscures the book titles on the spines. It makes the path ahead look dangerous and unclear. Nour runs down a long aisle, looking for clarity. But the aisle stretches longer, turning into a confusing maze. She feels small, lost, and intellectually trapped in her mind. The warm golden light of the past is gone. It is replaced by a cold, flat, lifeless gray. She is drowning in information, but starving for truth.
Nour is sitting in a busy, noisy campus cafeteria. She is physically surrounded by life and youthful energy. Students around her are laughing, eating, and complaining about exams. But Nour feels completely isolated behind a thick, invisible wall. It is a barrier of glass made of her secret doubts. She looks at her friends at the next table. They are discussing a movie and laughing about a joke. They seem so happy, so certain, so unburdened. They do not carry the crushing weight of existential dread. She wants desperately to reach out to them for help. She wants to confess her terrifying thoughts to someone. She opens her mouth to speak, to say, "I'm struggling," but the heavy words die instantly in her dry throat. They choke her with fear of rejection and judgment. She fears their shock, or worse, their pitying looks. She fears they will see her as lost or deviant. The shame of doubting keeps her silent and locked away. The noise of the cafeteria fades into a dull roar. The gray fog is now a personal cloud around her. It muffles the world and amplifies her own dark thoughts. She looks down at her cold food, unable to eat. She feels like a ghost haunting her own life. The isolation is more painful than the doubt itself. She screams silently in her heart, but no one hears. It is a violent, stormy evening, reflecting Nour's internal chaos. She is walking home from the library in driving rain. She has no umbrella, but she barely notices the cold. The icy water soaks her clothes and chills her skin. Her mind is obsessively replaying a debate she watched earlier. The arguments against faith seemed so strong and logical. They seemed undeniable in the face of her weak defense. "It's all a lie," a voice whispers loudly in her head. "There is nothing out there. You are talking to yourself." The thought hits her with the physical force of a punch. She stops walking in the middle of the empty sidewalk. The rain plasters her hijab to her face, mixing with tears. The streetlights flicker above her, casting long, distorted shadows. The shadows dance around her like mocking demons of doubt. The world around her seems to warp and twist violently. The gray fog has become a blinding, suffocating storm. It is a hurricane of confusion, tearing her apart. She feels the solid ground beneath her feet disappearing. It dissolves into a terrifying, bottomless void of uncertainty. The certainty she stood on for 20 years is gone. She is free-falling through a dark, empty, godless universe. The terror of that emptiness is absolute and overwhelming. She drops her heavy bag of books into a puddle. She clutches her chest, trying to keep her heart beating. She gasps for air, drowning in the open street. Nour stumbles blindly into her dark, quiet apartment. She is soaked, shivering violently, and utterly broken inside. She doesn't turn on the lights. The darkness matches her soul. She slides down the wall until she hits the floor. She sits there, hugging her knees tightly to her chest.
She stares blankly into the abyss of her darkened room. The Qur'an on her shelf seems to be miles away. She looks at it and feels a profound, aching distance. It feels like a relic from a life she lost. "Are you there?" she whispers into the oppressive silence. "If you are real, why can't I find you?" There is no booming voice to answer her cry. There is no sudden light, no miraculous sign given. Only the sound of rain drumming relentlessly against the glass. This silence feels like the final confirmation of her fears. She feels abandoned, foolish for believing, and terrified of truth. The visual metaphor reaches its terrifying climax. The room dissolves. Nour is floating in a vast, empty, gray void. There is no up or down, no light anywhere. There is no anchor to hold onto in this space. She is drifting aimlessly in a universe without meaning. The despair is total, a heavy blanket suffocating her spirit. She closes her eyes, wishing she could just stop thinking. This is the absolute rock bottom of her spiritual crisis. Nour wakes up on the cold floor as dawn breaks. The storm outside has finally passed into silence. A single, piercing ray of golden sunlight hits her face. She blinks, her eyes swollen and heavy with exhaustion. She crawls slowly towards the window and looks outside. The world is bathed in the soft light of a new day. Birds are singing their morning praise in perfect, rhythmic unison. The trees sway gently, submitting to the unseen wind. For the first time in weeks, her mind quiets down. She observes the intricate order of the natural world outside. A profound, intuitive feeling rises from deep within her soul. It is her Fitrah, her innate disposition, waking up. It whispers that this order cannot come from random chaos. The universe feels created, sustained, and purposeful in this light. The crushing weight of the gray void recedes slightly. A tiny, warm spark of hope ignites in her chest. She realizes she is not alone in this vast universe. Driven by this spark, Nour walks back to her desk. She picks up her biology textbook, but with new eyes. She turns to the section on human DNA and genetics. Before, she saw only random data and biological mechanics. Now, she sees a complex, breathtakingly elegant language. She traces the double helix structure with her trembling finger. It looks like a code written by a master programmer. How could this complexity arise from nothing? She asks aloud. The question marks that swirled around her head change color. They turn from aggressive, confusing red to a curious, soft gold. She realizes that science explains how things work, not why. The why points to a creator, a designer, a sustainer. The logical barriers in her mind begin to crumble down. The gray fog in the room thins, revealing dust motes. She feels a sense of awe replacing her intellectual arrogance. Her mind is finally opening to a possibility beyond materialism. Nour turns her gaze slowly towards the bookshelf, where her copy of the Qur'an has sat neglected for weeks. It felt miles away before, separated from her by a vast chasm of skepticism and arrogance. But now, in her brokenness, it calls to her with a silent magnetism. She stands up on shaky legs and walks over, her hand trembling visibly as she reaches out. She picks up the heavy, leather-bound book and gently wipes the thin layer of gray dust from its cover with profound reverence, treating it like a long-lost treasure she had foolishly discarded in the dark. She sits down on the floor, crossing her legs, and takes a deep, steadying breath to quiet her racing mind. She opens the cover, making a conscious, powerful intention. She is not opening it this time to critique, to dissect, or to find contradictions. She is opening it to listen. Her fingers turn the pages until she lands on Surah Fussilat. Her eyes fall upon the verse. We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. The verses hit her heart with the overwhelming physical force of absolute, undeniable truth. As the truth settles, the thick, suffocating gray fog that had choked the room evaporates completely. It is immediately replaced by a warm, brilliant, encompassing, divine light that floods every corner. She realizes her doubt was not a failure. It was the vehicle to a stronger faith. She wasn't losing her iman. She was refining it through fire. Hot tears of pure relief stream down her face, washing away the confusion. She clutches the book tight to her chest, feeling truly anchored for the first time. Nour stands up to perform salah, but this time is different. She performs wudu with a deep sense of spiritual purification. She stands on her mat, facing the Qibla with purpose. She raises her hands and says, Allahu Akbar, with absolute conviction. The words vibrate through her entire being, shattering the silence. She feels a physical connection to the source of all peace. The terrifying void is gone. She is in the royal presence. She recites Al-Fatiha, and every verse feels like a conversation. In sujud, she weeps, not from despair, but from gratitude. She thanks Allah for guiding her back from the brink. The golden light in the room intensifies, wrapping around her figure. She has moved from Taqlid to Yakin. Her faith is no longer inherited. It is now her own discovery. She finds the peace she was desperately searching for online. It was waiting for her on the prayer mat all along. A few weeks later, Nour is back in the library. The scene mirrors the beginning, but the atmosphere is transformed. The lighting is warm, golden, and vibrant with life. She is studying, but she looks calm, grounded, and happy. She is explaining a concept to a younger student nearby. She points to a book, her eyes shining with certainty. The towering shelves no longer look like walls closing in. They look like ladders to understanding Allah's magnificent creation. She wears a soft, bright sage green hijab, symbolizing growth. The confusing maze has straightened into a clear, illuminated path. She closes her book and looks out the arched window. She sees the beauty of the world with a believer's eye. She is still an intellectual, but now her heart leads. She has found the balance between questioning and submitting. She is at peace with the unknown, trusting the knower. Nour looks directly into the camera, adjusting her glasses gently. Her expression is wise, empathetic, and deeply reassuring to the viewer. Doubts are not the end of your faith, she says softly. They can be the beginning of a much deeper conviction. She pauses, connecting with anyone who feels lost in the fog. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but ask the right one. Don't let the noise of the internet drown out your soul. Allah is closer to you than your own jugular vein. She smiles warmly, radiating a quiet, unshakable inner strength. Seek knowledge, but seek it with a humble, open heart. When you walk towards Allah, He runs towards you. Turn your questions into prayers, and you will find your answers. Trust the journey from doubt to the peace of certainty.